The jealous sister. In the quiet village of Yukata, two sisters, Nkem and Obianuju, lived with their widowed mother. Nkem, the eldest, was beautiful, kind, and loved by everyone. Obianuju, though equally beautiful, was envious of her sister's charm and kindness. She hated how everyone adored Nkem, how their mother always praised her, and how even the village warriors admired her. One evening, an old woman visited the village square, claiming to be a seer. She announced, "The gods have revealed that one of the maidens of Yukata shall be chosen by the prince to be his wife." The news sent excitement through the village, and every maiden, including Nkem and Obianuju, eagerly prepared for the prince's arrival. The prince's arrival. A week later, the royal drums echoed through the village as Prince Chibundu, the handsome and powerful heir to the throne, arrived with his entourage. The villagers gathered to see him, and when his eyes fell on Nkem, they lit up. He could not take his gaze off her. Obianuju clenched her fists, her heart burning with jealousy. She could see it in the way the prince looked at Nkem. He had already made his choice. That night, as the village celebrated, Obianuju snuck into the forest, where an old and feared woman, Mama Ife, lived. The villagers believed she had powers beyond human understanding. "I want my sister gone," Obianuju hissed, her eyes wild with desperation. "I want the prince to choose me instead." Mama Ife chuckled, her voice raspy. "Are you ready to pay the price?" Obianuju hesitated but nodded. "I'll do anything." The old woman reached into a clay pot, pulled out a small black stone, and pressed it into Obianuju's palm. "Make your sister eat this, and she will disappear forever. But be warned, the spirits always demand something in return." Obianuju didn't care. She tucked the stone into her wrapper and hurried home, her heart pounding. A deadly plan. The next morning, their mother prepared a meal of yam porridge for the family. This was Obianuju's chance. While no one was looking, she crumbled the black stone into Nkem's food, stirring it in carefully. "Nkem, eat. You need strength for the festival today," she said sweetly, pushing the bowl toward her sister. Nkem smiled warmly. "Thank you, sister," she said, lifting the spoon to her lips. Just as she was about to take the first bite, a loud knock came at the door. Boom! 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 The sisters froze. Who could it be at this early hour? Their mother hurried to open the door, and standing there was a stranger in a dark cloak, his face hidden in shadows. "I have come for Nkem," he announced in a deep, chilling voice. A heavy silence filled the hut. The fire in the cooking pot crackled, but no one moved. Nkem swallowed hard, staring at the mysterious stranger in the doorway. His voice was deep, almost inhuman, and the air around him felt cold and heavy. Their mother took a cautious step forward. "Who are you, and why do you seek my daughter?" she asked, her voice laced with both fear and authority. The stranger tilted his head slightly. "I come from the unseen realm," he said. "The gods have sent me to take Nkem away." Obianuju's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't part of her plan. The black stone was supposed to make Nkem disappear, but she had expected it to happen quietly, without witnesses. Nkem, despite the fear creeping into her heart, stood tall. "I have done nothing wrong," she said. "Why would the gods want me?" The stranger took a step forward, and as he did, the flames in the hut flickered wildly. "The spirits are watching," he said. "They know when evil is near." His eyes, hidden beneath the hood, turned toward Obianuju. Obianuju's hands trembled. Did he know? Their mother, sensing the growing tension, quickly placed herself between the man and her daughters. "My daughter is innocent. If the gods have something to say, let them speak through the high priest, not a stranger in the dark." The stranger was silent for a moment. Then, without warning, he threw a small cowrie shell onto the ground. It rattled and spun wildly before stopping at Obianuju's feet. "The guilty one stands before you." His voice was like thunder. Nkem's eyes widened. Their mother turned sharply toward Obianuju, confusion written all over her face. "What does he mean?" Obianuju's throat went dry. She shook her head, forcing a nervous smile. I don't know what he's talking about. But the stranger wasn't done. He lifted a gnarled staff and pointed it at the pot of yam porridge. The pot trembled, and suddenly, thick black smoke rose from it, filling the room with a bitter, choking stench. Their mother gasped, stepping back in horror. "What is this?" The stranger turned back to Obianuju. "Did you think the gods wouldn't see your wickedness? You sought to harm your own sister." Nkem's breath caught in her throat. She turned to Obianuju, pain flashing in her eyes. "Sister, is this true?" Obianuju felt trapped. Her mind raced for an escape, for a way to deny it, but the evidence was right there, in the cursed food she had prepared. She had been caught. Tears welled in her eyes, but before she could speak, the stranger raised his hand. The hut shook violently, and the walls seemed to close in. A strong wind howled through the room, snuffing out the flames. Then, in a voice both ancient and powerful, the stranger said, "Now, you must face your punishment." A cold silence filled the hut. The stranger's words hung in the air like a heavy curse. Obianuju's legs trembled, and her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear anything else. Their mother turned to her in shock. "Obianuju! Tell me it's a lie," she pleaded, her voice breaking. But the truth was already exposed. The black smoke from the poison porridge twisted and curled in the air, forming strange, shifting shapes. The villagers, hearing the commotion, had begun to gather outside, murmuring in confusion and fear. Then, the stranger stepped forward. He lowered his hood, revealing a face that sent chills through the room. His skin was dark as the night, his eyes glowing like burning embers. This was no ordinary man, he was something else entirely. The spirits demand justice. "Obianuju, you wished for your sister's downfall. Now, the gods will decide your fate." Obianuju fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Please. I didn't mean to, she choked on her words, unable to continue. Nkem's eyes were filled with sadness, not anger. "Sister, why?" she whispered. Obianuju looked up at her, guilt weighing her down like a stone. Because you have everything. Everyone loves you. Even the prince." The crowd gasped at the revelation. The prince had been watching from a distance, his expression unreadable. The stranger slammed his staff against the ground, and the hut shook. The gods do not tolerate betrayal. Now, let them decide. Suddenly, the black smoke from the porridge rose violently, swirling around Obianuju. She screamed, clutching her chest as a strange force seemed to pull at her very soul. "No. Please. Forgive me," she cried. Nkem, despite everything, rushed forward. "Stop. She is still my sister," she begged. The stranger paused, his burning gaze settling on Nkem. The hut stopped shaking, and the smoke began to settle. "Your kindness is great, Nkem. The gods have seen your heart. But betrayal must not go unpunished." Obianuju gasped for air, her body trembling. Then, the stranger spoke his final words, "You wish to be unseen, and so it shall be. From this day, you will walk among your people, but they will never see you. Your voice will cry for mercy, but no one will hear. You will be a shadow, forever cursed by your own jealousy." A terrifying wind roared through the hut. Obianuju's body glowed, then faded, her skin turning into mist. The villagers gasped. She was still there, but when her mother reached out to touch her, her hand passed right through. Obianuju screamed, but no sound came out. She turned to Nkem, begging for help, but Nkem's eyes were filled with tears of sorrow. She was still alive, but she was nothing more than a ghost among the living. The prince stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on Nkem's shoulder. "The gods have spoken," he said. "Come, Nkem. Your kindness must be rewarded." But Nkem, her heart heavy with sadness, turned back to where her sister wept silently in the shadows. And as the villagers whispered in fear, the cursed sister, unseen and unheard, wandered into the darkness. The villagers slowly backed away from the hut, their eyes wide with fear. The whispers spread like wildfire. "Obianuju is cursed. She walks among us, but we cannot see or hear her. The gods have punished her for her wickedness." Nkem stood frozen, staring at the spot where her sister had been. She could still feel her presence. The air around her felt heavy, as if Obianuju's sorrow lingered in the space between them. "Obianuju?" Nkem whispered, stepping forward. She couldn't see her, but she knew her sister was there. A strong wind blew through the village, carrying a faint sob that only Nkem could hear. "She is still here." Prince Chibundu watched in silence. "The gods have given their judgment, Nkem. You cannot undo it." But Nkem shook her head. "She is my sister. I cannot leave her like this." The villagers turned to their high priest, an elderly man with white-painted skin and deep-set eyes. He stepped forward, leaning on his staff. "There is only one way to break such a curse," he said. Nkem's heart leaped with hope. "Tell me. I will do anything." The priest sighed. "A shadowed soul can only be freed through the tears of the moon." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman covered her mouth in shock, while an elder shook his head. "The tears of the moon," the prince said. "That is only a legend." The priest's gaze darkened. "A legend, or the only chance she has?" Nkem turned to him desperately. "What is it? Where do I find it?" The priest sighed heavily. "Deep in the heart of the forbidden forest, beyond the 7 rivers, there lies an ancient tree. They say its roots touch the spirit world. Once every 100 years, when the full moon shines brightest, a single silver droplet falls from its highest branch." He looked at her sternly. "This is the tear of the moon. If you place it upon Obianuju's lips, her curse will be lifted." The villagers murmured in fear. "No one who enters the forbidden forest ever returns. It is said to be guarded by ancient spirits and creatures of the dark. She will not survive." The prince grabbed Nkem's hand. "This is madness. You will risk your life for someone who tried to destroy you?" Nkem's eyes burned with determination. "She is my sister. If there is even the smallest chance to save her, I must take it." A sudden gust of wind swirled around them. Nkem felt a faint touch on her shoulder, as if an invisible hand was begging her not to go. It was Obianuju. Even cursed and unseen, she was afraid for her sister's life. But Nkem lifted her chin. "I will find the tears of the moon." With nothing but a small satchel and a wooden staff, she turned toward the dark horizon, toward the forbidden forest. As she took her first step, the village fell silent, watching in awe. The prince clenched his fists. "If you must go, then I will go with you." And with that, Nkem and Prince Chibundu set off into the unknown, where spirits, beasts, and dangers beyond imagination awaited them. The night felt colder as Nkem and Prince Chibundu ventured into the forbidden forest. The moon hung high and full, casting an eerie silver glow on the twisted trees and tangled vines that seemed to move in the wind like whispering spirits. "Are you sure this is the right path?" Chibundu asked, his voice full of unease. The forest was thick with shadows, and every rustling leaf seemed to carry the weight of ancient secrets. Nkem nodded. "The high priest said we must follow the ancient trail that leads to the heart of the forest. I can feel it, the tree is near." But as they pressed forward, a strange presence surrounded them. The wind picked up, howling through the trees, and the sound of faint whispers reached their ears. They could not understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable, a warning. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a low growl echoed from behind them. They spun around, but there was nothing, just shadows. Yet the growl grew louder, until out of the darkness, 2 glowing eyes appeared in the distance. From the underbrush emerged a creature, tall and terrifying, with the body of a lion and the wings of an eagle. Its roar shook the forest, and its eyes burned with an otherworldly fire. "The guardian of the forbidden forest," Chibundu whispered, his hand instinctively reaching for his sword. Nkem's heart raced. "We have to keep going. If we don't reach the tree before the moon sets, Obianuju's curse will be permanent." The guardian took a step forward, growling fiercely, its massive wings flapping. "None pass without the god's permission." Nkem stepped in front of the prince, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We come to seek the tears of the moon. The gods have already spoken. We are chosen. The creature paused, its gaze shifting between Nkem and the prince. Then, in a deep voice that rumbled through the ground, it said, "Only the pure of heart may take the tear. Your soul will be tested. If you are unworthy, you will remain here forever." The wind picked up, swirling around them like a cyclone. The guardian roared again, and suddenly, the air shimmered, as though the very fabric of reality was shifting. Nkem's body began to glow with a soft light, and she could feel an invisible force pressing on her chest. The whispers grew louder, filling her mind. Doubts about her sister, about her worthiness, but Nkem refused to listen. She stepped forward. "I will face the test." The guardian's eyes narrowed. "Then you shall prove your heart." In the blink of an eye, the forest changed. The trees vanished, replaced by an open field bathed in moonlight. Before her stood a mirror, its surface rippling like water. "Look into the mirror, Nkem." The guardian's voice echoed around her. "What do you see?" Nkem took a deep breath and stepped forward, staring into the mirror's surface. At first, she saw her own face, calm and determined, but then, the reflection began to shift. She saw herself, bent low in grief, watching Obianuju's painful cry. She saw the jealousy, the anger, the corruption of her own heart. Nkem's chest tightened. The whispers in her mind grew louder. Was she truly pure? Could she ever overcome the darkness within her? Just as she felt herself falter, a voice pierced through the doubt. "You have already proven yourself, Nkem. You have chosen love over bitterness. You have chosen to save your sister, even at the cost of your own life." Nkem's reflection shifted once more, this time showing her as a light in the darkness, a protector, a sister, willing to face all odds for the sake of love. With a final surge of energy, she reached out, and the mirror shattered into silver shards, falling to the ground like raindrops. The guardian stood silent for a moment, then slowly nodded. "You have passed the test." He stepped aside, revealing the ancient tree, its branches reaching toward the moon, where a single silver droplet glistened. Nkem rushed forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached up and caught the tears of the moon in her hands. "Thank you, gods, for guiding me." As she turned, the guardian spoke once more. "The curse will lift, but remember, love is the greatest power. It can heal even the deepest wounds." Nkem returned to the village with the tears of the moon, and as the silver droplet touched Obianuju's lips, the curse was broken. Obianuju, now visible once more, stood before her sister, eyes filled with remorse and gratitude. She dropped to her knees. "I am sorry." Nkem smiled, her heart overflowing with compassion. "We are sisters. Always." And as the moon began to fade, so did the shadows of jealousy, replaced by the light of love and forgiveness. The end. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe to African Folktales King for more thrilling African folktales.